Hi, Grace Lynch. This is just continuing from the last one. So, the first part of it is realizing that experience isn't something that happens to the body. Experience is something that happens to the mind coping with the change of the body inside the circumstance. So the world changes every cell of the body every instant of every day irrevocably. So the person in one instance, the entire physiological organism of a human being is changed in one instant to the next into an entirely different one. Very similar, but not the same. That's why the telomeres get shorter, as the cell divides. And I'll get into that later. Um, so when experience changes the body, usually the mind has a very rapid way of adjusting the situation and making sure, in alignment with personal safety, that I'm still me, the world is still the world, everything is the same. But when an experience is extreme, when the change in the body for whatever reason is extreme, it could be anything that's too much to cope with. If there are too many changes that happen at once, especially in a very subtle way, then the body has been changed anyway. The experience changes the entire body, so a total experience happens. But the brain only processes as much as it's allowed to by the body, because the body has to make the brain be safe. That's the body's job. So when I realized that the real problem that keeps trauma stuck is that when an experience happens in a way that the brain can adapt itself and update itself, when the experience happens inside a certain homeostatic zone, like a thermostat in the apartment, then when it's inside the zone, then the brain can take pretty most of the experience and update all of me from one moment to the next, from the change from who I was before the event happens to who I am after the event happens. And usually this works so well that we don't even notice. We actually, most of the time, seem to believe that we're inside a steady experience of reality, which has never been the case. If you believe in thermodynamics and entropy and things like that, that's not ever been true. It just looks that way. And it's a helpful conceit. So when I started entertaining the fact that I questioned my own narrative about how I was dealing with experiences that continued to bother me, I saw that line. We saw that the world dominated us. And so that is on page 66 at the bottom of the AA Big Book. I began to piece together that my body's experiencing memories in the present, but the story I'm telling myself about what's causing the feelings and experiences is in terms of something that isn't happening anymore. My long experience with aphasia had been that my emotions come from my body, and then my thoughts come from my emotions, and my beliefs come out of my thoughts, so it's from the ground up. It would be lovely if emotions were caused by feelings. This is a little aside here, but that's actually not logically possible, and here's why. When I notice a feeling, I have to feel it in my body. Noticing a feeling means like I find the word for it. That's how I would cognate about feelings, right? Finding the language means I have to have an experience in my body that my brain is finding the word for. Because there's the feeling and then there's the name of the feeling. I cognate about the name I defined for the feeling. The problem is that the experience I have for the feeling I come to name has to come before I name it. The feeling has to be in the body first, have happened, before it's there for me to find the name for it. Causally, that makes it permanently impossible that the feeling follows from the thought. Because the thought has to come from the word. The word can only happen after the feeling has taken place. And so the flow of time locks that in forever, that feelings must precede thought. It is totally impossible that feelings follow from thought. That's a delusion of story mind. So once I realize that the experience is in me that's causing the sensations that I think that I'm dealing with, and I ask myself what the reason is, because my mind's trying to understand. My mind skips to the story about the experience. And then I start to realize that the story I'm telling myself about the experience doesn't resolve the feeling. If I really find out what's bothering me, I get agency around the thing and I know what to do about it, or I know why to accept it and I can move past it. When my act of finding an explanation for what's bothering me does nothing to change the sensation, I start questioning my narrative that I've actually gotten to the heart of the problem. And I once I started doing that, I'm like, wait a minute, I've got a story I've been telling myself about why this memory is bothering me. What if that story is not correct? What if the real reason, and then I started to explore it inside there. When I questioned my own narrative, I asked what's really bothering me in a past memory. And when I was willing to, with the safety of the structure of the inventory, to go back and visit these things that were bothering me, I found out that the same kind of feeling in the present would have had experiences in the past that resonated with it. And I found myself going back to the first one, which was when I was very young, the first time I did this. And the difference was that unlike this original one, was probably, I think I was like 3 or 4, I didn't feel safe. What I found was that the reason it was trauma is inside the moment of being that person, I was trying to process and understand my sensations, feelings, thoughts, and beliefs in a way that felt like I was having to keep myself alive. The difference is that inside the process of the inventory, I could go back and be him, but no longer have to struggle with understanding what I am feeling, sensing, thinking, and believing in that experience in order to save my life. Because now I'm aware that I'm in the future and I didn't die. I'm currently here. That demonstrates that the person I was did just fine. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to be with what the actual experience was, but I'm going to understand myself inside the experience instead of being lost in the experience trying to understand the outer circumstance. When I'm willing to be inside the experience with the added security and grounding that I'm no longer exploring the meaning of the experience for the purpose of surviving it, because now it's all these years later. When I take my time with that, I find that the inventory becomes a grounding structure. And I can go back and experience myself in the moment, the sensations, the feelings, the thoughts, and the beliefs, and I can write them down. And I did that. And then in this way, I got to know myself and how I honestly responded in that moment. And out of that was amazing because I wrote these things down because I was that person. Those responses are real. Even though I don't hold them anymore, it taught me about who I am. And I found very quickly that there were responses, things that I no longer believed. But like the most glaring one was I didn't feel I would ever be safe inside this thing when I was 3 or 4 years old. Ever. And now I'm like, 52 years old. And I've had spiritual experiences and I have a relationship with reality that I am safe. So I realized my beliefs have changed. That's very cool. The problem is that I can look back over my life and I can see that because I had the belief that I wasn't safe at 3 or 4, that played a role in how I lived the rest of my life up until I had the experiences that changed things. So see, that light is really annoying. So see, then I began to come to understand the mechanics of how I was having an impact on the world based on beliefs, thoughts, feelings, and sensations that I no longer held, but because I get to know myself, I get to understand from the experience inside out. And as I found myself doing that, I was no longer afraid of that experience. And I started to find that the time jumping stopped and the experience started to take its natural place in the flow of my internal narrative. So more in the next one.